Substance use and initial experience. A couple of years ago, I tried AMT given to me by a trusted friend. The AMT was obtained from an online source and had been tested by the person who originally purchased it. Along with it, I also received 4 doses of 5-MeO-DMT. I wasn't sure about the exact AMT dose, but my friend recommended smoking 3 to 4 tiny crystals over a week, totaling around 12 to 16 crystals. Over 2 months, I used 5 doses of DMT, smoking it off foil with a glass tube. The DMT crystals resembled salt and vaporized instantly. Each session had similar effects. Minimal open-eye visuals, but intense closed-eye visuals resembling a liquid-like warp speed effect. Physically, I experienced increasing G-forces and a pleasant tingling sensation. The high lasted about 45 minutes and dissipated almost instantly. During this period, I also consumed marijuana regularly, eating normally but inconsistently, drinking various liquids, and occasionally consuming alcohol. In the last 2 weeks, I smoked around 5 grams of crystal meth, mainly off foil. AMT experience. The week before my AMT trip, I took a 60 milligrams dose of fine powdered AMT in a gelatin capsule. 2 hours before, I consumed a small Bacardi citron shot, followed by 2.5 grams of marijuana, which I later realized was a mistake. The AMT took about 2 hours to kick in, starting with a relaxed, stoned, and slightly drunk sensation. At the beginning of the trip, I was in a house with 9 people for about 2 hours. White surfaces took on a rainbow effect, similar to oil slicks on water. Before leaving, we smoked about a 1/4 ounce of marijuana through a bong, where I likely consumed about a 1/4 of the total. Instead of feeling lethargic, I felt an increased sense of well-being, similar to a Thai massage. Peak effects. We drove across town for hours. Around hour 4, I felt intense tingling and became fascinated by colors and visuals. Clouds appeared like Michelangelo's creation of Adam, and edges had iridescent rainbow effects. Flowers by the roadside stood out vividly, even at 100 to 110 kilometers per hour. I fixated on a pink stuffed rabbit with metallic eyes, becoming possessive of it. At one point, I found a baby pacifier and compulsively chewed through it in about 90 minutes, then moved to McDonald's straws due to uncontrollable jaw clenching. Surprisingly, I had no jaw pain or mouth injuries afterward. By hour 8, I felt sexually aroused, but in a more mental than physical way, finding myself intensely drawn to the idea of seeing people naked. I also noticed swelling in my face and hands, sweating profusely, likely exacerbated by prolonged sun exposure. During a stop at my workplace, a friend noted my normally green eyes had turned a milky dark yellow, while another friend's blue eyes had changed to a light purple. This was confirmed in multiple photos. Late trip and side effects. I experienced moments of childlike behavior, waving at passing cars with the stuffed rabbit and laughing uncontrollably. At a friend's house, I initially panicked when left alone but later settled down, mesmerized by her beauty and voice. Around 2015, I felt safe enough to sit up but did so repeatedly, enjoying the sensation, until I suddenly vomited without warning. The vomiting was intense and nearly uncontrollable. The sudden onset and difficulty in holding my breath could have been dangerous, especially if I had been lying down. Possible contributing factors included sun exposure, alcohol, or excessive cereal consumption. Afterward, I drank nearly 3 liters of water and stopped sweating about an hour after sunset. By 2 o'clock, I was dropped off at home, still fully experiencing the trip. I played Grand Theft Auto 3 until 10 o'clock without taking a break and hadn't used the bathroom since before taking the dose, despite drinking a massive amount of water. Conclusions and takeaways. Visuals and sensory effects. Strong, vivid colors, enhanced perception, and childlike fascination with textures and objects. Jaw clenching. Extreme need to chew, leading to destruction of multiple objects. Sweating and swelling, likely linked to sun exposure or AMT's physiological effects. Sexual arousal, primarily mental, with intrusive thoughts about nudity. Emotional and social behavior, increased emotional attachment, childlike joy, and brief panic when alone. Vomiting, Sudden onset with no warning, potentially dangerous if in a different position. Prolonged effects lasted well beyond 24 hours, with high energy levels and focus. AMT was an intense experience with a mix of euphoria, hyper-awareness, and uncontrollable physical side effects. Despite no major negative consequences, the potential risks, especially vomiting, dehydration, and overheating, were notable. Future users should consider these factors when planning their experiences. Substance use and antidepressants. Over 2 years, I cycled through Effexor, 6 months, Prozac, 6 months, and Zoloft, 1 year, each at progressively higher doses under my doctor's guidance. The effects of mixing substances remained largely consistent across SSRIs, but Effexor stood out. It brought a unique euphoria that no other antidepressant provided. That high, however, was fleeting. Tolerance built quickly, and soon, it was just another pill that dulled my emotions, leading me to abandon it. But I wasn't ready to give up on feeling something more. I started experimenting, pushing the limits of what my mind and body could handle. It didn't take long before I realized that mixing SSRIs with other substances was like throwing gasoline on a fire. It could burn bright, but the aftermath was unpredictable and often brutal. Stimulants, MDMA/meth/cocaine. The first thing I noticed was the intensity. Euphoria surged beyond anything I'd felt before, contradicting the common reports that SSRIs mute stimulant effects. It was overwhelming, intoxicating, until the crash hit. And when it hit, it shattered me. The comedown wasn't just depression. It was a complete unraveling of self. An unbearable emptiness took hold, as if my ego had been ripped apart, leaving me stranded in a void of helplessness. Side effects, too, became monstrous. On Prozac, after a 1 to 2 day meth binge, I couldn't stop talking, not in the usual tweaked-out, overexcited way, but in a detached, delirious rambling. Words spilled from my mouth without my awareness, whether I was alone or with friends. It felt as if my mind had been disconnected from my speech, and I was just a passenger in my own body, watching the wreck unfold. Looking back, I'm sure the high doses of SSRIs played a role in amplifying this effect. The neurotransmitter overload was too much, making these combinations not just dangerous, but completely unpredictable. LSD, low-moderate doses. Taking LSD while on SSRIs felt different. The trip was softer, as if the edges had been sanded down. Visuals lost their sharpness, morphing into more manageable patterns. Social anxiety, usually heightened on psychedelics, faded into the background, making me more comfortable in crowds. It was still a trip, just a controlled, less volatile one. Extremely high doses. Then came the deeper dives, where control ceased to exist. I learned firsthand what it meant to lose myself. Memory erasure. My mind became a series of disjointed images, like a slideshow of consciousness. The past and future ceased to exist. Time was gone. Loss of control. Thoughts didn't just occur. They consumed me. Every passing idea was an undeniable truth, shifting and unraveling in ways I couldn't grasp. Total ego loss. No identity. No past. No concept of self. Just raw experience. Completely untethered. One night, on 4 daily Zoloft pills, I took 8 LSD tabs. My last clear memory was sitting in my car, smoking a few bowls. The next thing I knew, I had destroyed my rearview mirror, pissed myself because I no longer recognized toilets as a thing, kicked out my back window, and vomited all over myself. My friend, who wasn't on SSRIs but had taken the same acid, blacked out completely after mumbling something incoherent and spinning in circles before collapsing. I was too far gone to notice. The trip had swallowed me whole. Mushrooms. Compared to LSD, mushrooms were gentler. The SSRIs dampened the trip slightly, smoothing out the rougher edges. The experience leaned toward warmth and peace rather than intensity and chaos. If anything, SSRIs made the journey more predictable, tilting it toward a calm, almost dreamlike state rather than a deep, mind-warping exploration. Unlike LSD, I never felt completely lost, just detached in a way that was still manageable. PCP. PCP was another story entirely. Since I had never tried it without SSRIs, I lacked a baseline for comparison, but what I did experience was an overwhelming, almost surreal euphoria. The numbness was absolute, and the high lingered for days. I spent a month smoking PCP regularly, and during that time, life felt like an endless, bizarre adventure. Every moment was entertaining, every experience heightened. It was a non-stop ride of absurdity and detachment. I don't know if the SSRIs intensified the effects or simply allowed me to stay in that dissociative haze longer, but for those few weeks, reality felt optional. Conclusions: mixing SSRIs with stimulants amplified the highs, but turned the crashes into something borderline apocalyptic. Psychedelics lost some of their sharpness at lower doses, but became a chaotic mess at higher ones, with extreme memory loss and total ego destruction. PCP was simply a prolonged escape from reality, though I have no way of knowing if it would have been the same without SSRIs in my system. In the end, SSRIs made my normal, unaltered existence feel unbearable. The weight of their side effects, combined with the unpredictable interactions, pushed me to quit them altogether. If there's one thing I learned, it's that mixing SSRIs with other substances is not just a gamble, it's playing with fire. And sometimes, that fire burns everything down.